When
you really
Alara
think
Vance
he
was
loved you?
humiliated by her
He
cheating
was
husband
laughing
and
at you
his
the whole
cruel
time.
mistress, everyone thought she was just a quiet, broken wife. But they forgot one truth. Behind her soft voice was the blood of the powerful Blackwood family. This is a story of betrayal, justice, and finding your true
Are you
identity.
certain you want to
Never
proceed?
let
This
anyone
will
dim
ruin
your
them.
light.
Good.
Please
They
support our
deserve it.
channel with
We
one
proceed
like
as
and
planned.
one share for more stories.
I warned
Thanks
you
for
this wouldn't
watching.
end well.
The champagne
If they
flute
discover the
shook
truth
in
about
Alara's
us,
hand.
we lose
Her
everything.
rival-s laugh cut through the party chatter, sharp and cruel like broken glass. "Tears, darling." "So common," Serafina whispered, her voice like poisoned honey. "William needs a diamond, not some wilting flower." Alara just stood there, a ghost in a borrowed gown, as her entire world fell apart for everyone to see. To them, she was just a quiet artist, the forgotten wife. But Serafina and her cheating husband had no idea. The blood in Alara's veins was older than the city itself, and worth more than all their cheap ambitions. They were about to find out that you don't mock a Blackwood. It's a mistake you only get to make once. The affair didn't start with a big fight or a receipt in his pocket. It was quiet. It was how William Vance, her husband, just started looking right through her. His eyes were fixed on some future she clearly wasn't in. He'd come home late from his tech startup, Vance Innovations, smelling of a perfume that wasn't hers. It was a sharp, bold scent of sandalwood and jasmine, a world away from her own soft vanilla and lavender. Alara tried her best to ignore it. She blamed it on stress. William was betting everything on the big Starlight Foundation Gala. This was his one and only chance to win over the investors who could save his company from going under. He'd told her with a tight smile, "Our whole future depends on tonight." He needed her on his arm, playing the part of the perfect supportive wife. "Just for a few hours, Ellie," he had pleaded. "Just smile, look pretty, and I will take care of everything else." And she agreed, just like she always did. Alara was a watercolor artist whose soul lived in soft colors and quiet landscapes. She saw the world in subtle shades, not the harsh black and white of a betrayal. She had willingly pushed aside her own incredible talent, letting her identity become just Mrs. Vance. She took care of their small brownstone in Brooklyn and her peaceful rooftop garden. She was the quiet, steady ground where William built his frantic dreams. Her family, the Blackwoods, had never been sure about the marriage from the start. "He doesn't see you, Alara," her older brother Marcus had warned her. His voice was low and hard, like the top of his boardroom table. "He just sees a comfortable idea." Her father, Alistair, a man whose name was spoken in hushed, respectful tones in the circles of old money and power, just looked at her with knowing, sad eyes. "Remember who you are," he had said, "even when you let someone else give you a name." But she brushed off their worries, thinking they were just being overprotective. They couldn't understand that she wanted a simple, normal life. She just wanted love, not a legacy. And she chose William because to him, she wasn't a Blackwood. To him, she was just Alara May, an orphan with a small inheritance and a gift for painting. It was a lie, a secret she kept. She had built this private world where she could be loved for just being herself. Now, the walls were collapsing. On the day of the gala, the lie finally broke her. As she picked up William's suit from the cleaners, a small velvet box fell right out of his coat pocket. This wasn't a box for some cheap little trinket. It was from Cartier. Her heart pounded as she slowly opened it. Inside, lying on black silk, was a diamond necklace. It was a waterfall of fire and ice, so bright it almost hurt her eyes. And it wasn't for her. Her birthday was 2 months ago. Their anniversary wasn't until the spring. This was a gift meant for someone else. That evening, while putting on the simple pearl earrings her mother had given her, she saw it. The proof was on William's phone, just left on the dresser. A text from Serafina. "Can't wait for tonight. I will be wearing your gift. Let's show them all what real power looks like. W&S forever." The breath caught in her throat like a sudden scream. The room started to spin. William and Serafina. It was all real. The perfume, the late nights, that empty space in their bed, it all came crashing down. He wasn't just cheating, he was building a whole new life, a new power couple right in front of her. And tonight, he was dragging his oblivious wife into the very same room as his mistress. The humiliation felt planned, like a deliberate, cruel joke. "Ellie, you ready?" William called from downstairs, his voice sounding so fake and cheerful. She stared at her reflection. A pale woman with wide, haunted eyes looked back. The simple navy dress felt like a costume. For a second, she wanted to smash the mirror, to just run, to call her father and let the Blackwood family completely destroy this small, pathetic man. But then, a different feeling settled in her chest, cold and hard like a stone. No, she wasn't going to run. She would go to that gala. She would be Mrs. Vance one last time and watch him put on his little show. She needed to see the woman he had sold her soul for. The gala was at Cipriani on Wall Street, a huge temple of money with soaring marble columns and high ceilings, all designed to make people feel insignificant. The air was buzzing with conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the smell of money, a mix of ambition and expensive cologne. Alara felt William's hand on her back, a possessive touch that now felt like being branded. He led her through the crowd, a charming, confident smile glued to his face, but it never quite reached his eyes. He was a true performer. "Darling, that's Arthur Harrison from the Harrison Group. I need 5 minutes with him. Just stand there and look lovely, will you?" He squeezed her arm, an order disguised as affection, and then left her by a huge flower arrangement. And just like that, Alara was invisible. She didn't belong in this sea of champagne. Women in designer gowns and dripping with diamonds shot her simple dress dismissive looks. Men in custom tuxedos glanced right past her, searching for more important people to talk to. She was just an accessory that her owner had put down for a moment. And then she saw her. Serafina Dubois didn't just enter a room, she conquered it. She was stunning in a red Alexander McQueen gown that looked like it was made for her powerful frame. Her hair was a sheet of black silk, and around her neck, blazing like a cluster of captured stars, was the Cartier necklace. It was a declaration of war, disguised as jewelry. She was not alone. She was surrounded by a group of admirers, all laughing at something she said. William, finished with Mr. Harrison, was pulled toward her like a moth to a wildfire. Alara watched with a strange, cold calm as her own husband walked over to the other woman. He didn't touch her, not right away. But the look he gave her was more intimate than any kiss could be. He leaned in, whispered something, and Serafina's laugh was deep and victorious. They were a perfect picture of power, beauty, and betrayal, and everyone was watching. The whispers started to follow them. That's William Vance. His company is supposed to be the next big thing. And that's Serafina Dubois. Her dad owns half the media in the city. Alara never knew that. William didn't just find a mistress. He found an upgrade, a business deal. Alara felt that familiar burn behind her eyes and rushed to a dark terrace, needing air that didn't taste of lies. The cool night air felt good on her face, but it didn't stop the burning shame inside her. She had been so foolish. She believed in their quiet life, in the promises he whispered in their little Brooklyn kitchen. It was all a complete lie. He never wanted a partner. He just wanted someone to fill the space until a better deal came along. A single tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but it was too late. A shadow fell over her. Well, look what we have here. Serafina was standing in the doorway to the terrace, a glass of champagne in her hand. The diamonds on her neck seemed to laugh at Alara's simple pearl earrings. Her smile was like a predator's. Hiding out here by yourself? Don't you know the staff is supposed to use the back entrance? Serafina's eyes scanned Alara's simple dress, her lack of jewels, and her tear-stained face. The contempt was so thick you could feel it. Alara stood there frozen, Unable to speak, this was her. The woman wearing her husband's love like it was a prize she had won. "Let me give you a little advice," Serafina said, stepping closer. Her voice dropped to a poisonous whisper. "Men like William don't want a watercolor. They want an oil painting. Something bold, expensive, and something they can show off. You're just beige. A nice, comfortable, totally forgettable shade of beige." She took a slow sip of her champagne. Her eyes locked on Alara's. He's going to be a giant in his industry. He needs a giantess next to him. Not a, "what is it you do again? Play with paints in some dusty little apartment?" Every single word was a perfectly aimed dart, hitting all of Alara's deepest insecurities. Alara had made herself small to fit into William's world. And now this woman was mocking her for that very thing. The tears she fought so hard to hold back finally started to rise, blurring the city lights behind Serafina. She hated herself for being weak, for letting this cruel woman see her cry. "Tears, darling." Serafina's laugh was the final gut punch. How utterly pedestrian. "You really should go home. This party is for winners. You just remind everyone where he came from." With a last dismissive flick of her wrist, Serafina turned and walked back into the warmth of the gala, leaving Alora alone in the cold. Her quiet world didn't just crack, it completely shattered. For a long moment, Alora just stood there, the cold marble of the railing seeping into her palms. Serafina's words echoed in the silence, each one a fresh wound. Beige, forgettable, humble beginnings. She wasn't just the wife who'd been cheated on. In their eyes, she was an anchor, a weight William was about to cut loose. Tears streamed down her face, hot tracks of humiliation on her frozen cheeks. It wasn't just the sting of betrayal. It was the pain of being so completely misjudged, so thoroughly underestimated. She had spent 5 years making herself smaller so William could be bigger, believing it was love. Now she saw it for what it was, a fool's sacrifice. Her hand trembled as she reached into her purse for her phone. Her thumb hovered over her father's name, Alistair Blackwood. One phone call to him and William Vance's world would be nothing but ash before sunrise. Her father commanded empires with a single word. He could crush William's pathetic startup, ruin Serafina's media mogul father, and erase them from society with the cold, quiet efficiency of a winter frost. But that felt too easy. It would be her father's victory, not hers. She would be the scared little girl running to her daddy. The woman Serafina mocked would be replaced by the powerful daughter, but Alara would still be a spectator in her own life. No, she needed her family, but not as a blunt weapon for revenge. She needed them as witnesses. She needed them to stand with her as she took back her own life. Her thumb moved down her contact list and pressed on Liam. Liam Blackwood, her youngest brother, was the family's public face. He was a brilliant lawyer, impossibly charismatic, with a smile that could charm a jury and eyes that saw right through a lie. And he was the velvet glove on the family's iron fist. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and concerned.
"Alara? It is past midnight in London. Is everything all right?" "No, Liam."
"It's not," she said, her voice hoarse from holding back sobs. "Nothing is all right." She didn't have to explain. The Blackwoods always understood the things left unsaid. She just had to give him the coordinates of her pain. "I am at the Starlight Foundation Gala at Cipriani on Wall Street." She took a shaky breath, her voice hardening with resolve. "William is here with another woman." There was a pause on the other end of the line, but it was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of a predator catching a scent. "I see," Liam said, his voice losing its warmth and taking on a dangerous edge. "Marcus and father are with me. We just finished our business with the Sterling Consortium." Alara's heart jumped. They were all in London together. It was a stroke of impossible luck, or maybe it was fate. "Liam," she said, her voice dropping low, matching his own sudden intensity. "He is about to give a speech. He is trying to secure his final round of funding from Arthur Harrison and a few others. His whole future, everything he has built on my silence, is riding on tonight. Another pause, shorter this time. She could almost hear the gears turning in his brilliant legal mind, the calculations already being made. And the woman? Serafina Dubois, daughter of Robin Dubois, of DMN Media, Ilara supplied, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Understood, Liam said. She heard a faint muffled conversation. Then his voice was back, crisp and decisive. The Blackwood jet is on the tarmac at Heathrow. We can be in New York in under 6 hours. Can you hold on for that long, Ellie? 6 hours. It felt like a lifetime. But the thought of her family crossing the Atlantic for her, of the storm about to break over this glittering world, was a lifeline. What are you going to do? She asked, though she already knew the answer. They were not coming for a quiet chat. The Blackwoods did not do subtle. We are coming to pick you up, sister. Liam's voice was grimly reassuring, and to remind a few people about the consequences of breaking a marriage contract in this case. Just stay strong. Do not let them see you fall. We are on our way. He hung up. Ilara stared at her dark phone. 6 hours. She pushed herself off the balustrade, her spine going straight. She walked back towards the ballroom, her steps no longer hesitant. She was no longer just the crying wife on the balcony. She was a ticking clock. She re-entered the ballroom and found a small empty table in a dark corner, a perfect place to watch the show. She ordered a glass of water and sipped it slowly, her eyes fixed on William. He was standing near the main stage, laughing with Serafina and charming potential investors. He looked confident, radiant, a man about to be crowned king. He had no idea a storm was gathering across the ocean, and he was standing right in the middle of it. The tears were gone, replaced by an icy calm. The prey had stopped running. She was now simply waiting for her pack to arrive. The next few hours played out like a surreal, slow-motion ballet of deceit. Ilara watched from her shadowy corner as William worked the room. He was magnetic, and his passion for Vance innovations was infectious. He spoke of algorithms and market disruption, of a future he was building all by himself. Investors who had been undecided, men like the stern Arthur Harrison, began to warm up, nodding along with real interest on their faces. Serafina was his perfect partner in this act. She would drift into a conversation, place a perfect hand on an investor's arm and murmur. William is simply a genius. Getting in on the ground floor of Vance Innovations is not an investment. It is a legacy. She was selling them as a package deal, a power couple in the making. At one point, William's eyes found Ilara in her corner. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, a silent command for her to either play along or disappear. She met his gaze without flinching, her expression impossible to read. He looked away first, turning back to the warmth of his new circle. He had dismissed her. To him, she was a problem to be handled later. The Gala's host, a local news anchor, finally took the stage. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce a man whose vision is set to reshape the future of data analytics. Please give a warm welcome to the founder and CEO of Vance Innovations, Mr. William Vance. A polite, then growing, round of applause filled the hall. William strode onto the stage, beaming, waving to everyone. He looked over at Serafina, who blew him a subtle kiss. He was at the absolute peak of his life.
Thank you,
he began, his voice echoing with practiced confidence. Tonight we are here to support the incredible work of the Starlight Foundation. But we are also here because we believe in the future. A future of connection, of innovation, a future powered by Vance Innovations. As he launched into his well-rehearsed pitch, Ilara felt her phone vibrate. A simple text from Liam. Landed. 20 minutes, a slow, genuine smile touched Ilara's lips for the first time that night. The clock was about to strike midnight, and then the show began. It was almost impossible to notice at first. A junior event coordinator scurried over to the Gala's organizer, whispering frantically in her ear. The organizer's face went pale. She began speaking into her headset, her eyes darting nervously towards the main entrance. Then Arthur Harrison, the key investor William was trying to land, discreetly pulled out his phone. His eyes widened as he read a message. He looked up at William on stage, his expression souring from interest to alarm. He tapped the shoulder of another potential investor, a man named Peterson, and showed him the phone. Peterson's jaw tightened. Within minutes, a silent panic began to spread through the room's most powerful guests. Phones were checked, quiet, urgent conversations were had. The mood in the room was shifting from celebration to tension. William, blinded by the stage lights and his own ego, did not notice. He was nearing his grand finale, his voice ringing with passion. And with a final round of Series B funding, which I am thrilled to announce we are closing tonight, Vance Innovations will not just compete, it will dominate. He was met with scattered, uncertain applause. The energy in the room had vanished. He looked confused, his confident smile faltering for the first time. He searched the crowd, his eyes finding Serafina. She gave him a questioning shrug, her own perfectly calm face showing a crack of confusion. It was then that the main doors of Scripriani swung open, not with a crash, but with a silent, heavy authority that seemed to suck all the air from the room. All conversation died. Everyone turned to look. Framed in the grand archway were three men. They were not dressed for a gala. They were in dark, impeccably tailored business suits that seemed to absorb the light around them. They moved, not with the swagger of new money, but with the unnerving stillness of absolute power. At the front was Alistair Blackwood. His hair was silver. His face was etched with the lines of 100 boardroom battles. His piercing, Arctic blue eyes swept across the room with an expression of profound disappointment, as if looking at a mess his child had made. To his right stood Marcus Blackwood, the CEO of the multi-billion-dollar Blackwood Corporation. He was tall and severe, his face looking like it was carved from granite. He held a tablet, his expression a mask of cold, calculated fury. And on his left was Liam Blackwood, looking completely at ease as he watched the chaos he was about to unleash. He locked eyes with Alora from across the room and gave her a tiny, almost invisible nod. The pack was here. They started walking forward, their footsteps loud in the shocked silence. Security guards, clearly following new orders, flanked them, pushing a path through the frozen crowd. Whispers began, quiet at first, then raced through the room like wildfire. "Oh my God, is that Alistair Blackwood? What's he doing here? He hasn't been to a public event in 10 years. That's Marcus Blackwood. They say he could bankrupt a country with one phone call. The Blackwoods were here." William stood on stage, completely paralyzed. His speech was gone. His moment of glory had just turned to dust. He glanced from the men to Alora in her corner, and for the first time, a look of pure terror and understanding crossed his face. Serafina was also frozen, her perfect socialite mask crumbling. She knew who these men were, the true gods of this world, beings from a level so far above her, she couldn't even comprehend it. The three Blackwood men walked right up to the foot of the stage, their eyes locked on the man trapped in the spotlight. The king's reign was over. His executioners were here. The silence in the grand hall of Cipriani wasn't just quiet anymore. It was something you could feel, heavy and suffocating in the air. William Vance stood on the stage, the spotlight now feeling less like a celebration and more like an interrogation lamp. He stared down at the three men who had just brought his entire world to a crashing halt. His face was a mask of disbelief. Liam Blackwood, always the showman, was the first to move. He gracefully stepped onto the stage, took the mic from William's limp hand, and spoke to the captivated audience. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. It was the voice of a man used to commanding the full attention of a courtroom. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Liam Blackwood. My brother Marcus, my father Alistair, and I are here for a rather urgent family matter." He paused, letting the weight of his family name sink in. Then he turned his eyes from the audience to William, a cold smile on his lips. "Mr. Vance, that was a very impressive speech. Full of passion, full of ambition." He then looked across the room, his eyes finding Alora, and he held out a hand toward her. "But it seems you forgot to introduce the most important person in your life, your wife." He waited. Every single head in the room turned to follow his stare, landing on the quiet woman in the navy dress who had been ignored all night. She stood up from her chair, and with a grace she never knew she had, started walking to the stage. The crowd moved aside for her as if she were royalty. Liam's smile grew wider as she got closer. "We're here for our sister," he announced, his voice crystal clear. "Alora Blackwood." The name landed in the room like a punch. You could hear a collective gasp. Alora Blackwood, not May, not some poor orphan artist. A Blackwood. She was the daughter of Alistair, the sister of Marcus and Liam, an heiress to one of the most powerful and private family fortunes in the world. All the color drained from William's face. He looked like a man who was watching his own ghost crawl out of its grave. He stumbled backwards, his mouth hanging open, but no sound came out. Serafina's reaction was even more extreme. The smug, confident mask she always wore cracked and fell apart, showing a face twisted in pure shock and panic. Her Cartier necklace suddenly looked cheap and tacky. She had made fun of a Blackwood. She had called a Blackwood beige. The size of her mistake was so huge, it was almost funny. Alora reached the stage. Liam took her hand and helped her up the last step. She stood next to him, no longer a shrinking violet, but a woman standing between giants. She looked at William, her eyes clear and cold. There was no hate in her gaze, just a deep and final sense of pity. Then Marcus stepped forward. He didn't even bother to get on the stage. He didn't have to. His voice was low, emotionless, and absolutely crushing. He looked up at William, tapping the screen of his tablet. "William Vance." Marcus started, sounding like a CEO delivering a terrible quarterly report. "As of 10 minutes ago, your main investor, the Sterling Hayes Fund, was bought out in a hostile takeover by a branch of the Blackwood Corporation. Their first official act was to pull their investment in Vance Innovations, effective immediately." William swayed. "No, you can't." "I can," Marcus replied, his voice slicing through William's weak protests. "And what's more, that big loan you took out last quarter to stay in business. We bought all of it this morning. The bank that handles your business and personal credit. My father has been on their board for 30 years. Right now, your company is broke. Your assets are frozen, and every bit of credit you have is gone." He glanced from William to a pale Arthur Harrison in the crowd. "For any of you thinking about investing in this project," Marcus said, his lip curling with disgust, "I would strongly suggest you reconsider. The Blackwood Corporation doesn't invest in failures, and we are extremely protective of our assets." The message was perfectly clear. Vance Innovations wasn't just dead, it was toxic. The investors, including Mr. Harrison, started to physically back away, putting space between themselves and William, as if he had the plague. Finally, Alistair Blackwood, who had been silent this whole time, stepped forward. He wasn't loud like Liam or cold like Marcus. His power was quiet, in the immense, crushing weight of his presence. He looked only at his daughter. "Alora," he said, his voice full of a gentle fatherly sadness, "are you ready to come home?" Alora looked at the shell of her husband on the stage, then at the terrified face of his mistress in the crowd. She looked at the mess that was the life she had tried to build, and she felt nothing at all, just a deep feeling of freedom. She nodded to her father. "Yes, Papa, I am." Alistair then looked up at William for the first and only time. He didn't say a single word. The look in his eyes said it all, pure contempt and judgment. In that one look, William Vance wasn't just bankrupt, he was erased. He went from a promising tech CEO to a footnote in the story of Blackwood anger. Liam put a protective arm around Alora's shoulders. "I believe we're done here," he said into the mic before letting it fall to the stage with a loud thud. It was like the final nail being hammered into William Vance's coffin. As the Blackwood family turned to go, a wall of their private security seemed to appear from nowhere, forming a perfect barrier around them. They walked through the stunned crowd with the calm purpose of a royal family leaving a disaster area. No one dared to speak to them. No one even dared to look them in the eye. They were like a force of nature that had just blown through, and the guests at the gala were just regular people looking at the damage. William was still on the stage, a sad statue in the harsh spotlight. The life he had built so carefully, the future he was so sure of, had been taken apart piece by piece in less than 5 minutes. He was a king who woke up to find his kingdom, his castle, and even his clothes were nothing more than a dream. He finally collapsed, not into a chair, but right onto the stage floor. He buried his head in his hands as dry, hacking sobs of pure despair shook his body. Meanwhile, Serafina was facing her own kind of social ruin. As the first shock faded, the other guests, especially the women she saw as rivals, started looking at her with a mix of pity and pure, open joy. In her world, perception was everything. The perception of power, of being on the winning side. She had tied her fate to William, thinking he was a rising star, and in the process, she had publicly and cruelly insulted a woman who turned out to be the sun. She tried to save the situation. She saw Auden Sterling, the wife of a rival media CEO, and walked over with a shaky smile. "Can you believe this drama, Auden? It's just awful." Auden Sterling was a woman who knew which side her bread was buttered on. She just looked at Serafina's Cartier necklace, then at her face, and gave her a smile that was pure poison. "Awful. I think it's the most exciting thing I've seen all year." "And you were perfectly cast as the court jester, Serafina." Then she turned her back on her. It was a social self-sentence, so final that people nearby actually backed away from Serafina as if she were contagious. Her father, Robin Dubois, would know about this by morning. His daughter hadn't just made a fool of herself. She had made a powerful, unforgiving enemy of the Blackwoods. The damage to his own media empire could be devastating. In her desperate attempt to climb the social ladder, Serafina had accidentally started a war she had no chance of winning. Her phone started buzzing with messages, but she already knew what they said. She knew who sent them, her furious father. Her fairy tale was officially over. Walking out between her father and brothers, Alara felt like she was floating. The giant, glittering ballroom from earlier now seemed cheap and tiny. And all those powerful people she had been so scared of? They just looked like scared little kids. She hadn't understood the power of the world she was born into, a power she had traded for a quiet life that turned out to be a lie. Just before the doors, she stopped for one last look. She saw William, a broken man, being helped off stage by a confused employee. Then she saw Serafina alone in her red dress, an outcast in the very world she fought to rule. Alara felt no victory, no sweet revenge. Just a deep, aching sadness for the woman she used to be, that trusting artist who believed in love. That version of her died on the balcony tonight. But when her father's hand rested on her shoulder, guiding her into the cool New York night toward a line of black cars, she knew someone new was being born. Someone stronger, who would never again forget her own name. The air outside was crisp and cold. Liam opened the door to the first car, a custom Rolls-Royce Phantom. "Where to, Ellie?" he asked gently. She gazed at the sparkling skyline, a city that finally felt like hers again. "Home," she said, her voice firm and clear. "The Blackwood Tower." It was not a request, it was a declaration. She was done hiding out in that Brooklyn brownstone. She was Alara Blackwood, and she was going home. The life of Mrs. Vance was gone for good. The real work rebuilding herself was just starting. The next few weeks were a silent hurricane of legal and financial moves, handled with ruthless speed by Marcus and Liam. Soon, William Vance basically vanished from public life. His company was absorbed by a Blackwood firm, its assets stripped clean, its name wiped from existence. He was forced into bankruptcy. The Brooklyn brownstone was sold to cover a tiny part of his debt. Rumor was he was last seen working a menial job in a warehouse in New Jersey. He was just a ghost, haunted by the life he had nearly grasped. Serafina Dubois fared no better. Her father, in a panic, sent her on an indefinite retreat to a remote clinic in Switzerland. Her social media went silent. Her name was erased, and the vicious socialite became a whispered warning. She had flown too close to the sun and got burned. But Alara couldn't care less about their fates. She had no time for ghosts. She was too busy finding herself again. Living in the Blackwood Tower penthouse, a glass fortress over Central Park, she felt the 5-year fog finally start to clear. At first, her father and brothers were fiercely protective, treating her like delicate, shattered glass. But they soon realized she was not broken, just dormant. One morning, Alistair found her in her private studio, a vast, sunlit space she had not used since art school. He did not find her with watercolors, but with massive canvases. She was smeared with thick, vibrant oil paints. Her old, gentle landscapes were gone. In their place were bold, abstract paintings filled with fury, sorrow, and a defiant happiness. The colors were loud, the brushstrokes were angry. It was the work of a woman who was finally taking up space. "This is powerful, Alara," Alistair said, his voice thick with emotion, looking at a canvas slashed with crimson against stormy blues. "I spent 5 years painting in pastels just to keep the peace," she replied, her eyes fixed on her work. "I am done with pastels." With the full backing of the Blackwood Foundation, she planned her first solo exhibit. She did not want a soft launch in some small gallery. She wanted to make a statement. Liam secured the entire ground floor of the MoMA for one night. The art world was buzzing. Who was this Alara Blackwood? An unknown artist backed by one of the planet's most powerful families. The night of the exhibit was more like a coronation. The room was not filled with socialites from the Gala, but with serious critics, collectors, and artists. Alara, in a stunning indigo gown, moved with a quiet confidence that was far more powerful than Serafina's loud arrogance had ever been. She was not Mrs. Vance, the wife, or Alara Blackwood, the heiress. She was simply Alara, the artist. Her work was a critical sensation. The New York Times review the next morning called her a vital, explosive new voice, her work a testament to the ferocious power of rebirth. Every single piece sold before the night ended. All the money went to a charity she had created to help struggling female artists. Late that night, after everyone was gone, Alara stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by her paintings. Her brother Liam came and stood beside her. "You did it, Ellie," he said softly. "You built something real out of the wreckage." "They thought my name was my power," she said, looking at the bold Alara signature on her favorite painting. "They never got it. The name just opens doors. What matters is what you do after you walk through." She had walked through a door of pain and emerged into a gallery of light, color, and her own strength. The story of the crying wife at the Gala would just become old gossip. But the story of Alara, the artist, was only just beginning. She finally understood the lesson her father tried to teach her long ago. She remembered who she was, and she would never let anyone define her again. 6 months after the MoMA show, Alara Blackwood was synonymous with artistic passion. Her work was famous. Her story was a modern myth. She had, by all accounts, won, a phoenix rising from the ashes. But as she sat sketching in Central Park, she felt the familiar weight of prison bars. Only these were made of solid gold. Her privacy was gone, a victim of her own spectacular success. As Alara Vance, she could sit for hours, and watch light hit a flower, completely unnoticed. Now she was a tourist attraction. People would whisper as they walked by, secretly aiming their phone cameras her way. "That's her," they would murmur, "the artist, the Blackwood." The two names were now welded together by the drama of that night. She wanted her art to stand alone, but it was always announced by her family's powerful name. She was not William's wife anymore, but she worried she was becoming her family's most valuable asset. That feeling became crystal clear during a meeting at the Guggenheim Foundation. They had invited her to join their acquisitions board, an honor she used to dream about. She came ready, with notes on new artists she loved, artists who were bold and different. But the meeting was not actually about art. "Alara, having you on this board changes everything," boomed the chairman, a heavy man named Mr. Davenport with a greasy smile. "With the Blackwood name on our fundraiser, we will finally get the Rothko wing." Another member added, "Exactly. Your brother Marcus's company is in tech. Perhaps you could convince him a digital art program would be a smart investment." Alara sat there, stunned. Her detailed notes suddenly felt silly and naive in her hands. They did not want her expertise. They wanted her name. They did not want her vision. They wanted her connections. She was a key, not an expert. The very power that saved her was now casting a golden shadow, threatening to smother the talent she fought to get back. Was this what her victory looked like? A promotion from a husband's accessory to a family's logo. That night she found her brother Marcus in the library, a massive room smelling of dark wood and old leather. He was staring at financial reports on a tablet, the numbers as cold and logical as the man himself. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He looked up, his expression neutral. "Is everything all right?" That night at the gala, she began carefully. "I am forever grateful. You, Liam, and Dad, you saved me. We protect our own," he said flatly, like a law of physics. "It is what we do." "But the way you did it," she pushed, pacing before the huge fireplace. "The demolition. You did not just end a marriage. You wiped a man off the map. You used a nuclear bomb to solve a family problem." Marcus slowly set his tablet down, giving her his complete, unsettling attention. He humiliated a Blackwood in public. He was building a company on your support while planning to throw you away. That wasn't a domestic issue. It was an attack on our family. Our response matched the insult, not the man. "But don't you see what that did to me?" she asked, her voice rising with a passion that surprised them both. "You didn't just show them our power. You branded me with it. When people look at me now, they don't see an artist. They see a woman whose family can destroy a life with one phone call. My success feels fake now. Did the Times critic really love my work? Or was he afraid of offending Alistair Blackwood's daughter? Did collectors buy my paintings? Or were they just buying access to our power?" Her voice cracked a little on the last question. "You saved me from William, yes. But did you ever stop to think you might be trapping me in something else? This name, it feels heavier than ever before." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He studied her, not like a father, but like an analyst solving a problem. "I see," he said at last. His voice wasn't cruel, but it held no warmth. "You're confusing the tool with the result. Our name, our power, it is a tool. That's all. It can be a shield like it was for you that night, or it can be a battering ram. The fact that it's also a spotlight is just a side effect. The world, Alara, is not a gallery where things are judged on pure talent. It is a battlefield. You were hurt, and we got rid of the threat." He stood up and walked to the huge window, gazing down at the city lights. "You ask if there was another way. Maybe. A quiet divorce. A settlement. And you'd have been known forever as the poor, tragic artist who was publicly cheated on. He would have become a success with his new wife, and you would have been a footnote in his story. We gave you a different story. One of strength, not victimhood. Yes, the name is now part of that story. It is your birthright. To resent it is to resent the very shield that's keeping you safe. He turned back to face her. The question is not what the name does to you, Alara. The question is what you will do with the name. His words, as cold and practical as they were, struck a nerve deep inside her. He was right. She had been so focused on the shadow her name was casting that she'd forgotten she was the one controlling the light. She could stay a passive symbol for others to use, or she could use her influence with the same care and purpose as a brushstroke on a canvas. The next week, Alara walked back into the Guggenheim boardroom. She accepted the position. Mr. Davenport started clapping loudly, but she raised a hand, silencing him. "I am accepting this position as an artist, not just as a fundraiser," she said, her voice filled with a new authority. "My focus will be on the art, and only the art. And my first proposal is this. The Blackwood Foundation will fund a new prize every 2 years, called the Emergence Prize. It will be the single largest grant for an undiscovered artist in the entire world." A buzz of excitement filled the room. "However," she continued, looking at every person at the table, "it comes with one condition that cannot be changed. The judging will be completely blind. The selection committee will only see the art, no names, no personal stories, no gallery backing. Just merit, and merit alone. I want to find the artists who have no powerful family to open doors for them. I want to find the talent that is screaming to be heard from the quietest places." The room was silent. She had taken their desire for prestige and turned it into an act of pure artistic integrity. She wasn't rejecting her power. She was reshaping it. She was using a sledgehammer to gently crack open a door for someone else. In that moment, she finally understood. Her name was not a shadow or a brand. It was a responsibility. William and Serafina had seen power as a weapon for their own personal gain. Her family saw it as a shield to protect themselves. She would turn it into a lantern to light the way for others who, like she once was, were still trying to find their way out of the dark. She was Alara Blackwood, the artist, and she was finally ready to paint her masterpiece, not on a canvas, but on the world itself. In the end, this was not just a story about revenge. It was a story about identity. Alara's biggest win was not seeing her enemies fall, but finding her own voice again. She had to lose the name Vance to truly become Alara. So many times in life, we let ourselves be defined by relationships, jobs, or quiet sacrifices we make, dimming our own light to make others comfortable. But true power lies sleeping inside us, waiting for a reason to wake up. Alara's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes hitting rock bottom is the only way to build a foundation strong enough to hold the masterpiece you were always meant to become. If this story of strength and justice connected with you, and if you believe in the power of writing your own story, please show your support by hitting the like button. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their own inner strength, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and empower you. Do not forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for listening.